up your engine. All right, just had a customer buy this 2008 Corolla for her son to drive around in, and we're gonna check it out. He says it starts hard when it's cold, but it's okay when it's warmed up. I know nothing about this car. He knows nothing. He just bought it. So let's start to figure why doesn't it start up right away. So we'll open the hood, check to see if anything obvious is worn out. We'll start with the air filter. You wouldn't believe how many times I found cars are running bad because the air filters were all clogged up. But in this case, perfectly clean, nothing wrong with that. So what about spark plugs? This has well over 100,000 miles. We'll check them. So we'll take the 10mm covers off. These dumb beauty covers, they drive me nuts. Get them all the way off. They make them too long, so they're a pain in the ass to take apart. Off it comes. Pull out the #1 spark plug. We gotta take the 10mm bolt off the ignition coil. Squeeze this so the electrical contact comes off and pull it off. Then we get a socket, stick it in, and take out the spark plug. Out it comes. And as you can see, baby got a lot of crud on it. It's flat, worn out. Now not only is it worn out, but when you look closely, it's covered with burnt stuff. That's burnt oil. This engine burns oil. This was not a good choice for the customer. Maybe it'll last a while, but the engine's burning oil. The previous owners did not take care of it. So we're gonna put new spark plugs in. If that makes it start cold, great, fantastic. But if not, odds are it's just going to have to live with that as long as it runs, because a worn out engine, when it's cold, will always start up hard, but then when it's warmed up, it'll start up okay. So let's pray the spark plugs fix it. So I'm going to put new spark plugs in, but this is a great lesson. If you only remember one thing when you're buying a used car, take out at least one spark plug. Look at it. If it's covered with burnt oil pieces, carbon, don't buy the car. It means the engine's burning oil. Why mess with it? It's somebody else's problem. Don't make it yours. Now, this is a Toyota Corolla. They can run years and years still burning oil. You'll have to add oil, change the spark plugs more often. Eventually, you might have to change the catalytic converter. But they can still run, only you don't want to get involved in that in the first place. So now we'll change out the 4 spark plugs. You just put them in so they're snug. Once you get them snug, get them tight. Then a little bit of a turn. That's snug enough. And of course, change all 4. Then we'll see what shape the engine is. Are they all burning oil? Or only some of them? Well, it looks like it's going to be all of them. The second one's burning a lot of oil too. Bad news. As is the third one and the fourth one. Previous owner or owners of this car did not change the oil frequently enough. Now the engine's worn. The new plug should make it run better. Just going to have to add oil as it burns and see how long it lasts. Well, now we got the spark plugs in. Let's see how it starts up when it's cold. Well, it starts up better than it did, but you can hear the engine clacking. That shows it's worn internally. You're just gonna have to live with that. Now, truthfully, if you would have brought me this car to buy, I would have checked the plugs, listened to the engine, I would have said don't buy it. Especially not for the $3,000 he paid. If you wanted to buy it for $1,000, go ahead. But $3 is too much for a car with all this wear. And I had just begun to check into it. I might find a lot of other things wrong. I'll take it for a quick spin, start it up again. You see, now it starts fine because it's already started up. And as we drive down the road, I'm also hearing something that's not good. Hear that roaring noise. We'll go faster and you'll hear it better. As we let loose, you can hear that woo woo woo. That means the front wheel bearings are going out too. This is a front wheel drive car. Pretty expensive job. Now, as I drive it around, I can tell both front wheel bearings are worn. It's a very expensive job, but I've seen people drive these things for years that way. I would hold off on that until it has actual play, and then it doesn't steer right. It's steering perfectly fine, and with all the things that are wrong with this car, I wouldn't throw that kind of money into it now. I might even try to sell it on and get rid of it if I was the person who purchased this car. Because when I'm done, it'll start and run pretty good. The AC blows cold. Might not be a bad idea to just get rid of this thing. Now, if you've learned 2 things from this video, the first one is pull out a spark plug on any used car you're going to buy, and if it's covered with burnt carbon, don't buy the car. And 2, don't buy the car, then bring it to a mechanic like me to check out after you've already purchased the thing. That's the old saying, don't put the cart before the horse. Horses are great at pulling carts when you harness them up, but they're no good at pushing them from the back. You do things backwards, bad things can happen. And that's why I tell people always have a real mechanic like myself. Check out a used car before you buy it. There are too many things that can go wrong. And don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Don't say, oh, I'm not going to pay the mechanic $100. I can check it out myself. It's worth paying them the $100. It can save you from nightmares. And at the least, it can save you from paying too much. Okay. Paid $3,000 for this thing, right? I would have given maybe $1,000 for it, realizing that it's going to need all this work in the future. It burns oil, yada yada, but it is a Corolla and they can run for years and years and years. But $3,000 for an engine that burns oil, front wheel bearings need replacing. We know the catalytic converter is going to have carbon and eventually that's going to need replacing. There's a lot of expense that I can see down the line with this car. So, hey, if you paid $1,000 for it, so what if you had to put a couple thousand in the next 3 or 4 years? But if you paid $3,000 and you had to put in, then you would have put $5,000 into a car that's worth 2 or 3 tops. Now, of course, there's one flaw in my thinking there. You gotta find a guy like me. There aren't that many honest mechanics left anymore. A lot of mechanics will check out a used car for you and they're adding it up in their head. Let's see, in the next 4 years, I can make a couple $1,000s off this guy. I'll tell him to buy the car. I'm not that way. I've actually lost customers over the years because I told them their cars were junkers because they were. And they got mad at me because they bought a junker car. Hey, I'm logical about it. I just tell the truth about it. My grandfather was the same way. I remember when I was going to high school and I was a young mechanic. Father's gas station, my grandfather was the chief mechanic. Used to have a fish truck come by in July. They buy gas, right? My grandfather came up and he said, "Ooh, wait, does this truck stink?" And it did stink of dead fish. There was no arguing that, right? The guy who ran the company, oh, he wouldn't come by anymore because he felt insulted. His truck stunk. That's the way it is. And in the case of this Toyota Corolla, it's a nice looking car, right? The inside's in decent shape. Sure, it's got some bird poo on the back, but, you know, it's a decent looking car. That's what fooled the guy into buying it. He did not check the mechanics of it. Sure, it's a Toyota Corolla. You know, people call them bulletproof. Well, no machine is totally bulletproof. If you don't change the oil like the previous owners on this didn't, it's going to wear the engine. I had a customer with one. He didn't change the oil on the thing until he had 80,000 miles on it. And I said, "Didn't you change it once?" He said, "Nah." And he said, "Hey, it ran good. I didn't care. Doesn't it burn oil?" He says, "You know, the first 65,000 miles, it didn't burn any oil. But now I got to put a quart of oil on every 1,000 miles or so." But he said, "Oil's cheap. What do I care?" Now, when it got to 110,000 miles on it, it was starting to run bad. The engine was really worn out. And he was a bit of a tactless person, being a salesman. So he sold it as a cash car to a guy. And the guy thought that it only had 15,000 miles because it was an old one when they went to 99,999, right? So he totally ripped that guy off. The guy figured it out later when his mechanic says, "Hey, this thing doesn't have 15,000. It's got a lot more," even though the thing was only 2 years old. He passed his problem on to somebody else. Even though it was a Toyota, everything will break down if it isn't taken care of. That's why you pay a mechanic to check it out. And I mean a real checkout. Not some guy that says, "I check him out for free," and he spends 10 minutes, drives around, says it's a good car. No. Pay a guy like me about $100 to do a bunch of tests, do computer scans, see what kind of shape the vehicle is in, and then give a true analysis of here's what's wrong, here's what's not wrong, here's what it's really worth, and go from there. Don't just buy it without a mechanic looking at it, unless you happen to be a mechanic yourself, because even a vaunted Toyota Corolla that looks as good as this one does and has freezing cold air conditioning in it can have a lot of problems in it when it gets to be really high mileage if the previous owner or owners did not take care of it. And from my experience, a lot of people with Toyotas, they're so spoiled with the cars not breaking that they never check anything. I had a customer 6 months ago, almost blew the engine up in her car. She had changed the oil in my Corolla. I changed it, like half a quart of oil came out. And I said, "Gee, you know, you're burning oil, do you check it?" "Oh, well, I had it changed last June," she said. She never even checked it. Well, it was burning oil now. She didn't add it, almost destroyed the engine. Even Toyotas need tender care every once in a while. So if you're buying a used one, don't just say, "Oh, yeah, it's a Toyota Corolla, great, I'll buy it." There are good mechanics out there, and honest ones like myself. We don't spend a nickel advertising because we got more business than we can handle. So ask your friends, look around, find an honest mechanic who knows cars, who's going to tell you the truth, and not tell you to buy some used car that he's going to make a lot of money, but be honest and have a lifetime customer like I have for the last 52 years. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.